love that, you all? Was that not amazing? Liz and Greg, you are here, and all of you are here. You have found us on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze for the world premiere of the Mighty Blaze video produced by the fabulous Margaret Pinard and edited by Books by Adrian. And it is quite astonishing. Let's hear, I mean, this, if there were Academy Awards for Best Mighty Blaze opening video, that has got to be it. And did you see all of your pictures in that video? They're all in that. Susie Baldwin is here, and Shannon Hansen is here, and Diane, and Sherry is here, and whoop for today's book, and Pamela Priest is saying, thank you for everything, and Sherry is saying, great video, and we are thrilled on this Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET. You have found us live on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I am Hank Phillippi Ryan, your host, as always, the USA Today bestselling author of 13 going on 14 novels of suspense. My current book is Her Perfect Life, so casually displayed notes over here behind me. And my new book, The House Guest, will be coming out in February, and I cannot wait to talk to you about that. It is Gaslight meets Thelma and Louise. But talking about meeting today, we are so happy to introduce to you a writer who goes by the name of E.G. Scott. But as you can see, there are two people on the screen with me, the real people behind E.G. Scott. And let me welcome Greg Wands and Liz Keenan, who are here today as the authors of this marvelous book. Comes out next Tuesday. Let me tell you two quick things about it. One, as I said, comes out next Tuesday, so you all are hearing it here for the very first time, and Greg and Liz get to practice what they're going to say about this book. Jenna Blum is saying most thrilling hour of the week. Did you see yourself in that video, Jenna? Really awesome. I have this advanced copy of the book, was the world's hugest version of The Rule of Three. There you go. I don't want it to be glary, but Greg and Liz have it so perfectly behind them. Let me tell you what Wendy Walker says about The Rule of Three. An intricate web of lies and misdirection follows as the body count rises and the pages begin to turn themselves. It's not paranormal. You're really turning the pages, but you know what I mean. It's really a fast read, a real page turner. E.G. Scott has spun a wild and devious tale with The Rule of Three. And I got to tell you all, wild and devious is absolutely right. That's great. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for being here today. And as I was saying, your pub day is next week. How are you guys doing as pub day draws closer?
I mean, well, thank you so much for having us, Hank. It's so great to be here. We're such big fans of your show, and I'm excited. I mean, it's always a little bit surreal to have the experience of writing a book, and then essentially a whole year passes, and then people start reading it, and we talk about it. So it feels always like an honor and a little bit of a surprise that anyone reads the books, and to have such praise from Wendy Walker is just an honor. So I'm very excited to be having our first interview here.
Oh, that's so nice. It's sort of the pre-launch test run for this fabulous book, The Rule of Three. And we are giving away, well, Greg and Liz are giving away a copy of, not this one, I'm keeping this, a copy of the real book to one lucky commenter. So leave a question for Greg and Liz. We will ask the questions at the end of the show. So leave a question from them in order to be entered to win a copy of The Rule of Three. And then we'll spin the wheel of fun, which we love, and see who wins it. Greg, how about you? When, as launch day approaches, what's in your heart at this point?
It's always a sort of fun combination of excitement and jitters, and it seems to happen that way each time. I would think maybe by now it would just be old hat, but it's not, which I'm very thankful for. I think it's exciting to still feel that kind of excitement as we did with our debut. And Liz and I talk about that sometimes, how it's sort of this very surreal thing that still we get to do. It is, to Liz's point, still a fantasy come true even a few books in. And I feel like that's a wonderful way to, I hope to not lose that feeling along the way.
Yeah, I think that's so wise of you. You want it to be new hat, right? You want it not to be old hat, new hat all the time, because it is a new book. I mean, every time is actually new.
Very much so. Yes. Yes.
And the experience of writing this book has been so different than our first two, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, every one is a different rodeo.
Definitely so. And with the pandemic, and you're right, that's so smart of you. We will talk about that in a little bit. Let me introduce you all to Greg and Liz together and separately. Very, very quickly, let me have 10 seconds to do this for you. E.G. Scott, we'll talk about that, is the pen name of writing partners Elizabeth Keenan, and Greg Wands. Together, they have written 3 novels, The Woman Inside, In Case of Emergency, and The Rule of 3. Their first book, The Woman Inside, was an international bestseller, which has been translated into 12 languages, and it is in development for a television series by Blumhouse, and that's fantastic. Their novels have been featured in Entertainment Weekly, BuzzFeed, Real Simple, and In Style. So you can see how chic and classy and contemporary their writing is, and that is absolutely great. So individually, Elizabeth Keenan is a writer and publishing consultant based in New York City. She has worked in book publishing for 18 years for imprints of Simon & Schuster, Penguin Random House, and Macmillan. Her work has been published in multiple anthologies and online. And Greg Wands writes for The Page and Screen, an avid lifelong reader who grew up in Sag Harbor, New York, and now calls Manhattan home. Greg is excited to have a novel, television series, and feature film project in the works. So you're the perfect person to be here for the premiere of the Mighty Blaze video.
Exactly.
Right? Perfect.
Yeah, I didn't bring popcorn, which is the only regret that I have of today so far.
I hope it's the only one.
I hope so.
Popcorn next time.
We get it out of the way right off the bat, and we're good. We're smooth sailing from here on out.
Do you allow yourself to eat the popcorn before the movie starts?
No, never. No, I have to have discipline somewhere in my life, and that seems to be, the only place I can really keep it consistent. So
I'm the opposite. I finish it before the movie even starts. It's like previews and then fully stuffed. Yeah.
I try to stop myself because I try to budget, but it's very difficult. So Greg, you're our hero.
Yeah, really.
For that kind of thing. I see more people coming. Here's Renee and here's Carrie saying The Woman Inside was in its 3 bonfires. So that's great. And Susie's saying, thanks for winning a copy. And Darlene is asking, is The Rule of 3 a standalone? And
Greg, you want to take that one?
So it is a standalone, as all of our books are, but there is also a through line. The detective characters of Wolcott and Silvestri make appearances in all 3 of our first books, though the books themselves, the plots and the characters aside from them, are standalone individual plots. So you can read them in order and you'll get a little bit more of the backstory on the detectives as you go, but you can also climb on board at any point and you'll get a standalone self-contained story in any of the books.
That is such a genius idea. And let's play on that a little bit, Liz, and both of you. That is such a brilliant idea to have the core be the detectives who we love, but in a completely different milieu and book. I think that's new, isn't it? Is that unusual?
Yeah. I mean, Greg, do you want to speak to that more? I feel like you write our detectives so well.
I guess the way it began was the first book. Liz and I have a particular way of writing, which is we write back and forth. I write a chapter, she writes a chapter, and we bounce the chapters back and forth. And in doing so, we put together a lot of the storyline and a lot of the plot twists as we go. We have a general framework when we start out normally. We sort of look at it as scaffolding.
Uh-huh.
And within that, we keep it loose enough that there's a bit of a competitive back and forth with us, where a lot of the joy of writing together is trying to stump the other person or write something that actually gets the other person a little bit worked up and then motivated to kind of come back on the other. So we go back and forth that way. And in doing so, it's a little bit like improv. Things are very much on the fly, and we keep the energy up that way. And we also discover things for ourselves as we go with the story. And I say that to sort of explain Wolcott and Silvestri, in that when we went into our first book, they came up as we wrote. And because the stuff that we write tends to have a bit of a heavier subject matter and can get a little grim, we found that having the detectives, it actually it gave a good tonal balance, because there's a certain amount of levity and humor and banter that the detectives throw back and forth, which keeps to
out and come. Did you see that? We all we all paused, we all buffered, we all had little circles, buffering circles, and we're all back. Greg, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. Yes. Yeah.
And Liz, are you back? Okay. And you all are back. That was weird. Greg, you are saying you came up with Walcott and Silvestri as you realized that.
We were saying that in order to keep the tonal balance a little bit, to add some levity in moments to balance the heavier stuff in the storyline, we realized that having the detective characters, it was a great through line because it did exactly that. If we're writing a book about opioid addiction or a serial killer or something like that, having some witty banter and repartee between these characters helps to balance everything out and keep it lighter in moments, so things don't get too bogged down over the course of a story. And sort of through that accidental discovery, we decided, well, why don't we keep them as the through line? And then if we have readers who are reading the whole series, they'll get a little something more out of the detectives in each installment. But once again, each story is a standalone. And we sort of stumbled upon that, and it's worked quite well so far.
Hank looks like she might have froze.
I think she did, yes.
And now we are two.
Now we are two.
A regular Agatha Christie.
That's exactly right.
Hopefully we'll get Hank back soon.
That's right. That's right. All right. She should be back momentarily.
Let's see. Well, hi, everyone in the comments. Thank you so much for watching.
Yeah, thank you for tuning in. It's exciting for us. This is our first, as Liz mentioned, this is our first event. So we're excited to be here. Kick it off with you.
Well, Renee, hi there. She's asking how the two of us got together to collaborate as an author. And it's a great question, and it's hard to believe we've known each other for as long as we have, but we actually met in college as theater undergrad, and we both were, acting, but also really interested in writing. And, in our friendship, realized we had a lot of crossover in our tastes, especially for books and movies, and kind of over the years cultivating friendships, talking about what we're loving to read and then loving to write, we really realized that, it was hitting kind of the same spot. And for me personally, I was always having trouble finishing things. And I really, relied on Greg just as a friend, as someone who I could bounce ideas off for accountability. And when we decided to come together to write our first book, we realized that the kind of volley style of challenging each other and shocking the other worked really well as like a practical writing exercise. So lo and behold, we kind of found ourselves with a working manuscript and a writing relationship that really worked.
Mm-hmm. And we did sort of stumble upon this again from the seed of an idea that we came up with at a dinner together several years ago now.
Yeah.
And we fell into, without really mapping out how we were going to go about it, came up with this general idea, these characters, went home, and the next morning I woke up to an email from Liz with the first chapter. And I read that, and that blew me away. And then I started to, the wheels began turning. And I thought to myself, oh, okay, this is how it's going to be. And I wrote a chapter back, and we went back and forth and put together a first draft more or less doing that. And it was an incredibly engaging and fun way. And as Liz mentioned earlier, the accountability is wonderful because I know for myself, I definitely have a procrastinating tendency. And so accountability is someone who you love as a friend and also respect as a writer. These are two twin motivators that are very, very strong. And it's served us well now through our third book.
Yeah. I would say also guilt is a major motivating factor for me too. I really don't like to let people down. So Thank you, Renee. Appreciate the question.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you.
I guess, are there any other questions? Oh, hi, Sherry.
Can you hear me?
How are you?
We can hear you.
I'm on my phone.
Oh, goodness.
As you can see that I thought, well, I'll just go in through my email and see if I can do it this way on my phone. So you all, I can't see the comments at all. I don't know who was here. So I'm going to turn the phone this way and see if that works another way. Yes, there it is. Okay. Fine. Talk about I have to tell you all that Greg and Liz earlier were saying as we started the show how wonderful this is and how fancy it is and how nothing ever goes wrong. And I'm like, oh, tell us how good it is when this is over. I'm like, yeah, well, not so great right now. Let me minimize this for 1 second, and I'm going to do it this way.
It's live TV, Hank. We're here for it.
Okay. Live
for
it, and you are here for it, and this is the first time this has ever happened. So thank you all for being so patient. Tell me where you were. What were you talking about?
So we got a really great question about how we came together as writing partners. So we were talking a little bit about that. And then there was a follow-up question, which, from Sherry. Do you see that, Hank?
Yes. What do you do when you don't agree on a plot point? Yes. What do you do?
I mean, that actually, believe it or not, has not come up that often. And I think that's a combination of a few things. I think, because the way we now outline our books and kind of, from the spitball phase, we go chapter by chapter about what we kind of want to see happen. Early on, if there's a plot point that doesn't really agree with me or with Greg, we can talk through it. In the actual writing process, if I write a chapter and Greg reads it, or I should say if Greg writes a chapter and I read it, and maybe there's an aspect of it that is kind of like a head scratcher, I'm not really sure how I'm going to get to my next points based on what he's written. Instead of maybe calling him and saying, I can't do this or I don't like that, we kind of treat it, or I treat it like a math problem. I try and find another way around. And I know that's happened in Greg's position with my chapters. Sometimes there's things that maybe just don't add up for him. And then he'll try and respond in a way that does. And I think, Greg, tell me if you think this is wrong. We've actually come to some very interesting twists and, plot devices that we didn't expect because we didn't plan on them because we've been thrown a curveball by the other person. So, that's kind of been my experience of it.
Well, you were talking earlier about improvisation, and improvisation is always to agree with what the person has said before and then add something to that. So it's all about yes and.
Yes.
And what you're both saying about the math of that. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I think what it is, the yes and is very much, is very germane to our process. Part of it is the math equation. It's sort of solving a puzzle. And what it is partly we've had the pleasure of speaking with other writing duos, and everyone seems to have their own particular methodology. But I think the underlying thing is you have to have a great amount of confidence and respect and trust in your writing partner in order to be able to do that. And I think because we do, we're able to say, okay, I can say Liz has a direction where she maybe sees this going. Let me go along for the ride. And again, I think it does bear a lot of fruit down the road because we are able to stumble sometimes into things, and having to problem solve, it does bring you to a new twist that you didn't see coming.
Which you must love when you embrace that. Is that fun?
It's amazing. Because it's like we're finding the story out the way a reader would as we're constructing the story. So we sort of get the best of both worlds in that, and it's a thrill, and it keeps us, I think, both engaged from a storytelling perspective.
Right. And I loved the comment that was made about we went from theater to math, and then Greg threw in puzzles. So we really are going the nerd gamut. But I think with the math equation too, as long as we've kind of agreed on what the solution is going to be, how we get there can be negotiable along the way. And I think that, as avid readers, as I'm sure everyone watching is, and we certainly are, there's sometimes books you read where you maybe wish things had gone a different direction and wonder what could have happened. And we kind of get to play within that field in our writing style.
And Sue Grafton used to call that the magic, and that's got to be, the best thing that happens to a writer. And forgive me, and I for the internet situation, but let's talk about this book. I'm not sure whether you talked about this specifically yet when I was trying to get my internet to work, but the rule of three takes place. Let's talk about where it takes place first, in this gated community called Kingsland. Kingsland. How did you come up with that community? And tell the readers a little bit about what that is.
So we'll give you a bit of backstory. What was interesting about this book, the way that Liz and I usually come together on a story is we spitball about things that we've been thinking about, reading about, turning over in our head. And oftentimes we share a brain in a lot of these ways where we are gravitating towards similar things around the same time. Mm-hmm. In this particular case, we were driving to a library event in Maine from New York. So we had a very, very long drive to mull over a lot of things. And at this time, the news was covering the Jeffrey Epstein case and had just come around to them discovering his body in the jail cell. And there was a lot of speculation in the news about whether he had died by suicide or whether there are other people who may have been involved. He ran in these circles with very powerful, influential people. I mean, ex-presidents and princes and Wall Street tycoons and socialites and billionaires. And we were talking about the implications of something like that, someone who lives in this sphere of great power and access, mm-hmm. and what that sort of life could bring about, and then how a demise could be tied into all of these things as well. So we came up with the idea of Kingsland sort of modeled on that basic premise. And mm-hmm. our three main characters are these women who are married to men who have been publicly canceled in one form or another. And one of the husbands, who's a disgraced former congressman, has put together this place, Kingsland, which is an invite-only private enclave for similar people who have all been publicly canceled. And we came up with this idea because suddenly you have this baked-in premise when a murder occurs, or in our case, a series of murders, where all of these people are implicated in some way or another and are tethered to different forms of corruption and crime and things. So suddenly all of these people have various motives, and it puts together a pressure cooker of a sort of a crime scene behind that kind of setup.
And a vast suspect list. I mean, in a case like this, it could really be anyone in the community. And as Greg kind of alluded to, there's a lot of, kind of questionable, unreliable characters living in this group. And not just the men who've been canceled, but the women who stand beside them, which was another aspect that was really fascinating to us. In the case of Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell didn't just stand beside him. She was, she was involved, and very much so. But there was lots of incidences where very high profile men were being canceled around this time that we were talking about the book. And then it was interesting, the women who kind of stood beside them, what their motivations were and what their involvements were. And that's something we explore a lot in the book.
Yes, I think it's fascinating. And so I think it's fascinating because one of the things that you do so wonderfully in your book is you take a very timely and important and potentially difficult topic and wrap it in a fast-paced, page-turning mystery. So it's not this heavy-handed commentary on something, but it is thought-provoking. Is that your goal?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as a reader and a writer and, someone who likes to talk about books, and things happening in the news, I think in the spectrum of kind of creative interpretation, we really like to, interpret people's motivations, especially, we have a lot of unlikable characters in all three of our books. And we both really like the idea of how did people become this way? What's their backstory? Kind of what's their pathos? And I think, intentionally and somewhat unintentionally, just through the writing process, we've tried to find, as Greg was talking about, some levity with the detectives, and then kind of with these unlikable characters, like to what degree are they really associated with what's really happening in their lives? And I don't love to read things that I feel like people are really hitting me over the head. Yeah. With opinions or that are too strident. I like to be able to have my own opinions and still enjoy the story. So that's certainly, I think, one of the places we're coming from when we write about things that we're inspired by from the news, but not necessarily commentating in a very direct way.
And that's exactly, I agree with you. I think it's one of reading this book, the first level of fun with the book is the story, is the secrets and the mystery and who did it, and this complex and intriguing crime puzzle. a puzzle of a crime. And then the three women who are the lead characters in this story, you can think of it the rule of three, whether they rule the world, or the rule of three, the name of a book. Talk a little bit about where the title came from.
So the title actually touches on, it has multi-meanings, but at the very face of it, the Rule of Three is the title of the book that is the book club selection of the three main characters. So when our book opens, we have a night of a book club that meets regularly, and there's another a poker game that's happening simultaneously. So the three wives are in the book club and the three husbands are in the poker night. And the book selection of this current time is The Rule of Three, which is a self-help book. And that's not necessarily typical for this book club, but is important to the story, and I won't reveal too much why. And on this particular night, two of the three men at the poker night end up dead, and one ends up in intensive care. So that kind of is where we're off and running. And as far as the meaning of the Rule of Three, it's the book title. It's also, it's kind of a, pardon my French, bastardized version of this kind of pagan occultist idea that whatever energy you put out into the universe, you will get back threefold. And that very much applies to everyone in this community, but especially the victims. So there's that. And then we play a lot with, three's a crowd. You've got the two sisters, and then you have this interloper wife who is now kind of joined their group. So there's a lot in the meaning of the title.
No, I love the title. I thought it was absolutely great. And I do think that the idea of people putting out energy in a certain way is very relatable. And one of the things I thought was so perfect about this book was how you delve so gorgeously and knowledgeably into people's motivations, why people do what they do, and to make it be understandable why people do what they do. So when you were talking about having unlikable characters, we understand them, we get them, we feel for them, and we understand them, but we might not have done what they do, but we might have. And you let us into their psyches to let us understand why.
Thank you.
Well, and as Liz touched on earlier, part of our motivation in general with characters, and certainly with the source material for what inspired this book, was the idea of inherited intergenerational trauma. And so we tried to explore that, and we explore that very specifically in different ways with all of the characters. And I think that gives, certainly as a reader, I get that feeling from well-developed characters, and we try to do that. I think that makes it, whether or not you can relate to that character's particular experience, background, motivations, it gives it the ring of truth. And I think that for a reader, you can at least see that character and maybe understand a bit about what put that character in the space to carry out whatever the action is. So that's always our aim.
But, as you're doing these sort of character studies of the three women, and in sort of in the background, what happens to their husbands, and then the undercurrent of the story of what happened in the past, which is all so gorgeously juggled and so much fun to read. There's still, the patented E.G. Scott twist and twist and twist and twist. So you readers must read. And I should have reminded you in the chaos to make sure that you put up a question for Liz and Greg to win a copy of The Rule of Three. You have to really read to the very end to get everything in this book. But how much fun was that?
Oh, I mean, it's always just because of the style in which we write, where we kind of know where we're headed, but we don't exactly know how we're going to get there. Right up to the last page, it is such a experience of, kind of joy and surprise. And, the twists that Greg throws in always throw me off. And I have to say, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who are tuning in, if you read a lot of crime thrillers, sometimes you can figure out what's happening, around the second act. Some people are great. They can do the first act. And I have yet to be really, able to not be stumped by Greg. So there were a lot of twists and turns that he put in that, both shocked me and inspired me. And that is just, it's the best kind of experience you can have with any job, I would say.
How does your brain doing that, Greg?
Say again. I'm sorry.
How does your brain come up with those twists? How does your writer mind work?
Well, firstly, Liz is being a little bit deferential to me here, which is not entirely earned, because I have to say that my favorite twist in this, and I don't want to say anything more, but I'll say the twist that sets up the ultimate twist, she came up with that one. And every nice thing she just said about me, I'm only able to do because I have her as a writing partner. And again, it's the volleying back and forth. And I think that we get into a good groove, and that probably for both of us makes everything, it kind of greases the wheels in such a way that it makes everything kind of pop in different ways. And it allows, for me, I know it allows access to different stuff. When she throws me a curveball, it gives me the opportunity then to say, okay, how am I going to work my way out of this? And in doing so, a lot of times it just does that. So it keeps the energy up, it keeps everything fresh, and then we get to discover things as we go. And to your question earlier, Hank, I think that's what allows us to keep the twist coming until the tail end. And it's fun.
Reading this just applauding, like, reading it as a writer and a reader is especially enjoyable, because I see your minds working in there, and then I think, oh, look at that, they did that, it's fantastic, really, really great. And I think all of you who are listening to us today can also hear the mutual respect and admiration of these two writers. No wonder they work together so gorgeously. We were talking earlier about the difference in writing this book because of the pandemic, and how your lives were changed by that. Talk a little bit about how that affected the writing of this novel.
Yeah, I mean, there has been big differences in, our first book, where we lived, within 5 minutes walking distance, probably got together once or twice a week, just dedicated to working on the book. The second book, we actually wrote in a much shorter period of time and did a writer's retreat. So we were holed up for 2 weeks and, working actively on that. And then for this book, the pandemic happened. And, one of the things we write about in the intro is this book was a real lifesaver. The pandemic happened, we were all in lockdown. I know a lot of readers and writers experience this kind of, what do I do with myself? How do I not just watch the news constantly? I still needed that escapism of writing and reading. And what we did is we wrote this, same style back and forth, but we really weren't in the room together more than a handful of times, just because we couldn't be. And I think this kind of urgency to escape what was happening around us, and there's just like so much unknown, and being able to really like have an ejector seat into this world we had created that was so different than the one we were in, was really critical for our personal experiences. And then just kind of the gravy of that was we ended up with a book we were really happy with.
Is that how you felt about it too, Greg?
Absolutely. Yes, it was definitely, I had, along the way of writing this book, I found myself thinking that I felt very fortunate that we had the chance to do our first two books in the way we had, because I think this would have been a lot more disorienting and daunting and intimidating had we not already gotten into a very good rhythm together and sort of understood each other's flow and how we work and how we bounce stuff off of each other. It made it a little less daunting. And to Liz's point, the escapist factor for us was good. It helped to have something to combat that sort of low-lying anxiety that was going on that I think a lot of people felt in one way or another. To be able to key into something and engage our brains was really.
There was this specter of fear hanging over everything.
Yeah.
But I do love to envision you two sending your chapters back and forth, and then waiting with anticipation to hear what the other had said. Talk a little bit about those moments when you first read the other's chapter.
Well, we have a sort of a joke going back and forth. It's not really a joke. Is if we've done our job right, the other person will send a filthy text message to us, basically cursing us for, now you've ruined my weekend. Now I'm gonna, ruin your life. So and we just go back and forth like that. I mean, we get a glee out of tripping one another up and making them, need to come back on the last chapter.
But
It's our fuel.
Time. So you're raising the bar on each other every time.
Every time.
No. And the pressure is real. I mean, this is, I've known Greg for many, many years. I mean, decades now. But, so we do have a shorthand, and there's probably not a lot of things that are new that I can come up with that he hasn't seen coming down the pike. So it keeps me sharper. It keeps me more excited. It also, I said earlier that like guilt is a motivating factor. Like I don't want to let him down. And if I'm just writing for myself, I really have a hard time finishing things. But if I know that he's waiting for a chapter and that my chapter is keeping him from getting his word count in, I will get that done. So it's kind of the combination of like perfectionistic people pleasing, and then also, knowing that I'm doing him a favor of getting him his next, time in the chair to write.
But it's also a favor for all of us. And forgive me for doing this. I keep getting text messages and I'm moving them off the screen. I know that's probably, you're thinking, does she have bugs in the room? Is there flies? It's really an engaging thought to think of. You have this method, this ping pong raising the bar method, when really what you're doing is working together so gorgeously to create a new thing for all of us to read and enjoy. I mean, that's got to be part of the motivation as well.
100%. Yeah. I always think about the readers. Greg, you go ahead, but
we probably are going to answer this largely the same way. I was going to say, as a writer, I usually come to it as a reader first with that mentality. What would we want to read? What's the most engaging way to do it? Having respect for your reader as a writer, I think, is the best way to do it. And to be fortunate enough to have a very talented writing partner who engages in that same way, and we have a ball with it. I mean, what's the most fun reading experience? I feel like when you read a novel that someone's written and you can tell how much fun they had writing the novel, that makes the reading experience all the better.
No, the passion comes through when the writers love what they're writing. It somehow makes this super connection to the reader. And yes, indeed, we can really feel that. Let me ask one last question of you both, and then we'll take questions from the audience, which I hope I'll be able to see, Margaret, on this tiny, tiny screen when you put them up. So if you see me squinting at the screen, that's because I'm trying to see the questions. Did you each always want to be a writer?
Absolutely. I mean, I think just having books introduced at a really early age and being fortunate enough to have parents who read to me very early, and then, realizing that I wanted to create stories of my own. And yeah, I've been writing pretty much as long as I could write. And, to find a kind of person who is simpatico in style to, as I said, help me kind of get my butt in the seat and get the words down has been really a blessing.
Same. Yes. I was an avid reader as a kid. My parents read. My mom is a librarian, so sort of come about that naturally. And both of my parents read to me as kids, and I had a voracious appetite and have always been a big reader. And then when Liz and I connected later, first with theater and then later with the written word, we have a great flow and a great, I think, simpatico creative relationship. It's wonderful.
Did I miss when you talked about how you met?
Yes, that was when you were offline, but we can fill you in later.
Okay, I'll watch the video. I want you all to watch the video. You all are marvelous. You're not only wonderful friends and terrific writers, but so patient with the technical difficulties that we have had today. You're all marvelous about that. And I'm really grateful for that, for your keeping the plate spinning while I was pushing buttons on the other end. Thank you for that. Let's take some questions from people and we'll see whether I can read them now. Darlene says, how do you pick your characters' names? What a good question.
Well, I usually defer to Greg because he is great with names. So, I would say for the most part, you've come up with the names of like collective characters. We divide the characters up, I'll write 3 and Greg will write 3, or however many are within the book we're writing. But for the most part, Greg is very good at naming.
How do you do it, Greg?
There's no real science to it. I come up with, sometimes if there are 2 characters, such as Wilcott and Silvestri, I try and come up with names that are complementary. In some way, that have enough of a contrast that they sound good together. Sometimes something just hits me in this case, Liz and I also will occasionally Easter egg a name of a friend somewhere in.
Mm-hmm.
Our agent makes an appearance in this book as a lawyer, for instance. I mean, we riff a bit and we find things that kind of work.
We got our significant others in as cops.
They're in as cops, exactly. Yes. And then a dear friend of ours, who's a literary agent, is actually a law partner of our agent as well. I mean, we pepper them in when we can.
I love that. And now all of you who are listening to Crime Time know the secrets of the names, and you can search for that as you read. That's great. And it's interesting because sometimes when you get just the right name, you can really tell, can't you?
Yes. So
who else has a question? What is your writer's drink of choice? Says back room. We all need a drink right now. So yeah, tell us what.
Well, just to stay coherent and focused, I am of the non-alcoholic beverage nature, but I love iced hibiscus tea. That's my drink.
Yeah. I'll usually have a drink after I'm done writing for the day, and that can be a glass of red, a glass of whiskey. In the summer, sometimes I'll do a gin. So kind of depends. I'm more of a seasonal drinker.
Exactly. I mean, the idea of when you get your words for the day done, and that real psychic pressure is off your shoulders for the day.
Yes.
You can have a nice glass of wine and think, I did this. I did my job. I did what I was supposed to do. And some of those words might even be good.
Exactly.
Who has one last question? Time for one last question. What do you have planned for next week, says Sherry, for launch week? Question.
Well, we have a lot of really fantastic online Instagram lives upcoming, which we're super excited about. I mean, getting to talk to our friends and fellow writers and bookstagrammers is like the greatest part of this job. So that's what we're planning. And then Greg's going to be doing some in-person events for us. I will not be attending because I am currently 8 months pregnant. So I'm a little bit landlocked, but yes. So Greg will be doing we've got 2 or 3 events booked at this point, which you can talk about.
Yes. So we have a number of IG lives next week, which is very exciting. We start off on Monday with Vanessa Lilly. We have The Grateful Red on Tuesday. We have Guaranteed Reads on Wednesday. And then Thursday, we have an in-person event at the Ram's Head Inn on Shelter Island. That's through Finley's Fiction, which is a wonderful bookstore out there. They've begun doing a Thursday authors event this summer that's apparently has been going very well. They've booked some great authors. And so I'll be very excited to be out there in a week and a couple days.
That's fantastic. And tell everybody where to find you on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, because you all will want to follow E.G. Scott, Greg, and Liz. Tell us where to find you while I read this question. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Marty Blake, put up your IG, but you tell us what your handles are.
Well, and we're on egscott.com. If you want to visit our website, has all of our updates for events. And then at E.G. Scott Writes. Is that correct, Greg?
Yes, it is.
You can see who does social media in this partnership.
Exactly. You don't have to find yourself on Instagram and Facebook. You already know where you are. You just click. You all are such good sports, and I really, really appreciate it. All of you who are watching today and listening today, thank you for being here through the chaos, never a dull moment on Crime Time. Let's spin the wheel of fun and a copy of The Rule of 3. And here we go. I want you to know that I can't see your comments at all. So we're going to spin the wheel now and see who wins. And the winner is Pamini Mom. Pamini Mom. Love that name.
PA Mini Mom. Yay.
PA Mini Mom.
Yes.
Nice.
That is Teresa. So I'm so excited. One of our loyal fans.
Oh, that's great. I love that. And Teresa, thank you so much for coming. PA Minimum, that is pretty clever, wins The Rule of 3. And we're so glad to welcome you here, Teresa, especially today. Thank you. Oh my golly, Greg, Liz, never a dull moment. You are fantastic. And we are also grateful for you juggling throughout. Let me show you what we have on tap for next week. I moved the books in the chaos. We have 2. Oh yeah, live TV. You are so right. And here I come. I'm back. Next week at 3 p.m. on Prime Time, we have The Murder Rule by Dervla McTurnan. This is a fabulous legal thriller. She's joining us from Australia at a special time, 3 p.m. ET, because we don't want you to miss The Murder Rule by Dervla McTurnan. And then at 4 o'clock on the regular edition of Prime Time, a completely different kind of book, Zach Bissonette. And if you know him, he is wonderful and hilarious and so talented. This adorable cozy called A Killing in Costumes. So we have at 3 o'clock a serious, fast-paced legal thriller. And at 4 o'clock, a fun page-turning cozy. And you can't do better than that because we have something for everyone. We are double booked, as it says. And when you're double booked on Prime Time, that is the only time it's good to be double booked. Greg and happy pre-launch. I can only tell you, it will only get better than this.
No, this has been great. Thank you so much, Hank. We love being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime. Congratulations to you, and let Crime Time know whatever we can do for you. And for all of you who are listening, I'll come back and look at your comments as soon as this is over because I haven't seen any of them. But until next Tuesday at 3 p.m., remember this: it is always safe inside a book. And we will see you next time.